hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor Kevin Maguire and the Sun's political reporter Noa Hoffman. Welcome and good evening to both of you. So let's see what's on the front pages then. The Guardian leading with Joe Biden's promise of $6 billion in US government funding to be given to Northern Ireland if power sharing at Stormont is restored. That story also making the front of the Eye, the headline, Biden appeals for Stormont breakthrough as the US denies he is anti-British. Confirming Prince Harry's attendance at the coronation, the Daily Mirror says the spare will be there. Harry's blink and you miss it coronation visit is on the front page of the Daily Mail. The Telegraph also covers the Duke's decision, saying his appearance could spark hopes for a royal truce. Similarly, the King's relief that Harry will be there is the focal point for the Daily Express. Whereas the Sun focuses more closely on the Duchess's absence. The King was there for you, the paper writes. So sad you can't make it for him. The Metro hears that the broadcasting regulator Ofcom has received more than 1,000 complaints about the Channel 4 programme Naked Education, which airs before the 9 o'clock watershed and features full frontal nudity. The Financial Times says the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey is considering reforming the Bank Deposit Insurance Guarantee Scheme, aimed at making sure smaller banks don't fail. And on a far different note, The Star tells us that penguin excrement could help save the planet, but there isn't enough of it. Or them, by the look of it. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. But let's head straight now to our guests, Kevin Maguire and Noa Hoffman. Get on to Harry's attendance in just a moment. But first of all, to the Biden visit. Kevin, you kick us off if you can. First of all, obviously in Northern Ireland, democracy needs champion as he made a bid for parties to return to Stormont. How's it gone so far, do you reckon?
Probably predictably, with some loyalists and unionists very much against him, accusing him of being anti-British. He's had to respond to that, but most people seem to have greeted him quite warmly. I don't think it's any breakthrough moment, but you can see from the Guardian that this idea of holding out prosperity if there is peace and increasing the amount of US investment in Northern Ireland is certainly a carrot that should be attractive to many people. Although I query the figures, tripling it to $6 billion from $2 billion. That $2 billion was over the past decade. I just wonder when the other $4 billion would go in and what real guarantee is there it would be delivered when most of it would be the private sector. But no, it's a bit shaky because he is seen. He's Irish. He's proud of his Irish roots. He's a Catholic. So part of the community in Northern Ireland is just going to be wary of him, not to say hostile. Well,
let's, bring in the idea that the White House had denied that he's anti-British. He certainly spent the first part of his speech at the Ulster University campus in Belfast, Noah, explaining that his family had Huguenot roots and that they came from Nottingham, trying to establish he had a bit of British or English in him as well, I suppose. So it's not, the fears for the Unionists, of course, is that he's a Republican president. So how did the had to deny he's anti-British come about?
So he has had a series of historic gaffes where he alludes to his Irish heritage and his Catholic Irish heritage as well, which has worried, as Kevin pointed out, some unionists. And so obviously he was very keen to stress that he isn't anti-British and to sort of relay any underlying fears of some unionist MPs and some Tory MPs as well, who have behind the scenes been saying that they don't think this visit is helpful and that they don't think Biden is going there in good faith for all parties involved. But I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I don't think he is anti-British. And I think he just needed to make that very clear because of some gaffes he's made in the past. And Rishi Sunak was very clear and confident that Biden was visiting the province, in good faith, and that what both leaders want to see is the resumption of power sharing. However, that looks very unlikely to happen in the near future.
Yes, and watching pictures of there with with the Deputy Leader, Michael Martin, at Carlingford Castle. The suggestion, of course, is that was the last view of his great-great-grandfather, Owen Finnegan, who left during the Irish famine in 1849 for a new life in the United States. And his relative, Owen Finnegan, would have stared back at the castle as he departed the shores. But a great picture in the Financial Times as well, Kevin, of the lead role, as he puts it, the US President Joe Biden embracing James Martin, who starred in the recent Oscar-winning film An Irish Goodbye during his visit to Northern Ireland yesterday. But it was brief, that Northern Ireland visit, wasn't it? Very brief. Blink and you miss it. We heard about the Harry visit for the coronation. You could almost say the same for the bit in Northern Ireland today.
No, I think that's right. It was really toe-touching, wasn't it? About half the, was it 15, 16 hours? Half of that he spent in his hotel, in bed. So it was a quick in and out to mark the Good Friday Agreement. And because he wants to get over the border, and if you could be pro-Irish, doesn't make you anti-British, but he wants to go over the border into the Republic of Ireland, where his family's from. He has those ties. And back home, 40 million Irish Americans or so, it's great for votes with a presidential election coming up. That's what it's really about, yeah. It's about the Good Friday Agreement, it's about the Republic of Ireland, but it's also about winning a presidential election next year and showing the Irish voters back home, you're popular in Ireland, you understand them, you've got roots like them, come and vote for me. That's what it is all about. It's a campaign trail now. And I think he was greeted enthusiastically. I think those shouting at him in Northern Ireland in the sense of saying he's anti-British, look, they're a minority even in Northern Ireland. They're not the majority by any means. So I think he'll feel it's gone pretty well so far, although he slightly knocked off course with having to say, like, I'm not anti-British, which is just an utterly ludicrous accusation.
Yes, well, it's picked up by the eye, isn't it? Biden appeals for stalwart breakthrough as the US denies he's anti-British. And the paper goes on to say that the eye has been told of the fear within UK government ranks that the trip risks alienating unionists. And certainly we heard from the Sinn Féin president today, Mary Lou McDonald, suggesting that she believed within the next decade there would be a poll on the unification of Ireland. And for the DUP and other unionist parties, therefore, Noa, you kind of get a sense of why this is sort of an existential threat as far as they are concerned.
Yeah, of course. They would be extremely worried about any sort of sentiment expressed by such a powerful leader, no less than the US president, that he may have sympathies with one side that goes against everything they believe in and everything they spend, every day fighting for. But as Kevin said, I really don't think that he is anti-British or that he is deeply personally partisan in the matter. In fact, he stressed many times that, how grateful he is for the Good Friday Agreement, how much he values it and how much he wants to see power sharing back up again. He hasn't hinted at taking any sort of side in any hypothetical future poll on reunification. So I understand the worries, because rhetoric, you need to be very careful with what you say in this area of politics. But I think there could be some, overly sensitive thoughts around that from some people.
Well, a packed programme of events for the president on Thursday. Full coverage, of course, of that. But let's move on to the strikes and a phrase or a title we've not heard for a while, the arbitration service ACAS. I had to explain it to some of our younger producers. I feel like I'm getting old, Kevin, has to be said. Anyway, the point being that junior doctors' leaders have asked for the conciliation service ACAS to break the deadlock with the government in the row over pay. Does this take us back to the 70s or the 80s, or was it the 90s? I can't remember.
All three. I used to spend many years as a journalist outside ACAS, where peace talks peace hopes would either rise or fall in whatever the negotiations were. And stayed until the early hours of the morning. Both sides would break up, then they'd resume. And God, I tell you, it was pretty miserable at times, because you didn't have anywhere to go for anything to eat or drink or go to the toilet. But I think it's a smart move by the British Medical Association to say, look, let's get to ACAS. I would have thought PR-wise, if nothing else, the government should accept and say, look, we may require a mediator here, the honest broker, of ACAS back in the news, you can get those talks going. They seem very, very wide apart at the moment, but there's always some hope, and perhaps there is a way. But no, ACAS will be thrilled at this. They do a lot of individual mediation with people now, but they are there for the biggies as well.
But like many other sectors, the doctors have made it clear this is not just about pay. It's recognition for how hard their life is. And, in a sense, the government keeps saying, well, we know what an amazing job you do, etc., etc. But, the fact that they're losing people, the retention of junior doctors, surely once again must drive people to think about making them an offer to end this strike action, Noa.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it is an issue about pay and the matter of conditions in terms of crumbling hospitals, ridiculously long hours comes secondary to that. But I think this issue of doctors moving overseas to countries like New Zealand, Australia, to work where there is a better lifestyle for them is something that's very worrying, and that the government really needs to sit down, the Department of Health, and think about. The 35% pay rise that junior doctors are asking for is really, really unlikely to happen and really quite unaffordable for the Treasury. I mean, we've just had the IMF saying today that UK debt is going... a pay rise is going to fan the flames of inflation, and that UK debt is growing, and that is all very concerning. And raising public sector pay in such a significant way could be very damaging to that. So I don't think the junior doctors expect to get a 35% pay rise either. That's sort of the starting point. They're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle, because as we've seen with the likes of the RMT union, other public sector, other unions, they haven't given up, they've kept going. So the government's going to have to compromise at some point, but finding that middle spot is going to be very difficult.
Yes,
I know there is an irony that Britain, the NHS, has spent decades stealing doctors from developing countries instead of training our own, and now we're in danger of losing those we train to other countries. But you just go back to the nursing dispute. And I remember the line from Steve Bartley, the Health Secretary, was no extra money this year. It's got to be the independent pay review body. You'll have to wait. And then he completely U-turned on it. Now, it's probably better he's going to U-turn again to do it sooner rather than later and avert some of the industrial action and more people being added to a record waiting list already over 7 million. And I think now, Noa and the junior doctors are right. No one's going to expect them to get 35% this year, but you need a workforce plan for the NHS, and that requires filling the vacancies, training the people, and you also need some scheme on pay to attract and retain and motivate staff right across the board, but it includes doctors who I think have a very good case that their pay has just been hugely eroded over the years, and all of a sudden we're now in a crisis as a result.
Yes, I was just going to add from what Noa was saying about the IMF suggesting that the debt to GDP ratio is heading quite swiftly to 100%. Quite a change from the financial crisis, certainly. Within 5 years, I think they said. So just to pick up on what you were saying.
I remember the Tories, David Cameron and George Osborne, were going bonkers when it was a fraction of that under Labour in 2010.
Yeah. I think it was in the 40s, wasn't it? Anyway, just very quickly, Noa, the final story in the Daily Telegraph we're going to look at is the change or the shake-up of how police deal with crime. We heard yesterday stats from London, a mobile phone disappearing every 6 minutes, suggestion that rows with neighbours and Twitter spats will no longer be recorded as offences.
I think this will be welcomed by a lot of people who care far more about, a really expensive and important item like your mobile phone being stolen than spats on Twitter. I mean, I get loads of Twitter abuse all the time, and it's not pleasant, but there are so much more important things that police should be focusing on, such as this issue of mobile phones, which effectively feels like theft of mobile phones feels like it's been decriminalised in London. If your phone gets stolen, or even if an item like a laptop gets stolen from your house, you're really lucky if the police are going to do anything about it. So these much more minor issues like spats, like social media trolls. I think there should be way more focus on these important issues that have a much more profound effect on the day-to-day lives of people before we then even look at those much more lower issues.